Smith, and I'd like to welcome you all here. We're going to go through the partnership promise. So the promise of community action is that community action changes people's lives, embodies the spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. So the practice transformation team, we have Lily Seals, who is our Director of Practice Transformation, Laura Griffin, our Program Associate for Learning and Community, LCRC, myself, and then Amy Roberge. And Tiffany could not make it today, but she is also a vital member of our team. So LCRC Overview, the purpose of the LCRC is to analyze community action outcomes and identify effective, promising, and innovative practice models that alleviate the causes and conditions of poverty. The Learning Communities Resource Center is the learning hub within the CSBG network to support the identification, adaptation, and implementation of innovative and evidence-informed services and strategies to improve results based on individual, family, and community level outcomes for the CSBG network. And here to start us off is our special advisor to the partnership, Jeannie Chaffin.
Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're at. We've got a great turnout today for this presentation, and I'm excited to kick us off and hand things over to some great colleagues at the Annie E. Casey Foundation. But before that, I just wanted to do some level setting and some context explaining to all of our folks out there who are joining us from community action agencies all across the country. We're going to hear today about data governance and really some great resources to help agencies navigate the many challenges that you experience as you're trying to use data to improve and enhance your work. And our relationship with Annie E. Casey Foundation, and when I say our, I mean the Community Action Partnerships relationship with the Annie E. Casey Foundation, really emerged out of some work that we started a couple years ago through the Community Action Economic Mobility Initiative. And this was a relationship where the Casey Foundation helped to form up a learning community of 10 community action agencies who were interested in shifting to a whole family approach or a two-generation model where they were serving parents and children intensely. And those agencies have made a lot of progress in the last couple years, and we've had many other community action agencies join us on this journey to shifting. But as we've done that, we formed a closer relationship with the Casey Foundation and learned more about what the research and evaluation side of the house was doing around data governance, and piloted some work with them. And so we want to bring the results of that to the Community Action Network today. We're very thankful for the relationship that the partnership has had with the Annie E. Casey Foundation, and you know it's really borne a lot of fruit in many different ways, and yeah, you're about to see some of that today. Let's take a look at the next slide, please. I mentioned those 10 CAAs, and there were 2 of those community action agencies, Central Missouri Community Action and Total Community Action in New Orleans, who piloted some of the tools and resources you're going to see in the toolkit. So community action actually had a voice in helping develop this resource to an extent. And also kind of intertwined in some of this work, we've been really working on interoperability. You know, as agencies shift to two-gen whole family, we recognize that managing multiple systems, having your parent data in one system and child data in another, really presents challenges, not just for whole family, but for lots of other kinds of initiatives you're doing. And the deep thinking that you're going to hear about today in the data governance toolkit can help to navigate some of that challenge and come into a better focus on how to solve some of those. The other thing I wanted to just call out for those of you on the phone or on the webinar, and may also be on the phone, some of the other work that emerged out of the whole family approach, community of practice, relates to a design plan that was created to help community action agencies think about their whole family approaches. And you'll find this design plan, the whole family approach design plan, on the National Partnerships website. And we can just flip to the next slide, which has maybe the next one. Kind of talks a little bit about the design plan and shows you the cover of that design plan and kind of calls out that the design plan really looks at helping agencies think through their theory of change and their logic model, their outcomes, their measures, their partners, how they're going to engage customers in designing a whole family approach. And I wanted to call that out today as we sort of move into talking in depth about the data governance toolkit, because the planning that you do in the design plan lays a great foundation that kind of can run alongside your data governance thinking around your whole family approach. So some of the elements, the measures and the outcomes are really helpful for getting kind of established so that you can make the best of your data and really work to have a very positive impact on the families that you're serving. So please take a look at that if you're wanting to go deeper into whole family, and as you're working on data governance, thinking about some of these other items for whole family and 2Gen can be very helpful. So let me pass it off to our colleagues over at the Annie E. Casey Foundation by first introducing T'Pring Westbrook, who's a senior associate for the Annie E. Casey Foundation. And she works on the Research, Evaluation, Evidence, and Data, or the READ unit at the foundation. And T'Pring has been a great thought partner and collaborator with us on 2Gen Whole Family. Our first ever Whole Family Approach Institute, T'Pring generously came and did some great work for us on theory of change and logic model. And we have so appreciated working with her. She also works on other economic mobility and child welfare issues, adult education, and Dr. Westbrook serves as an assistant professor at the University of Maryland at their global campus. So we're going to hand it off to our colleagues at Annie E. Casey Foundation and look forward to the yummy stuff you're going to bring to us today. T'Pring, let's go.
All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, depending on your location. I am excited to be sharing our data governance tool with everyone. So before I start, because we're all in different places, I wanted to take a moment and do a land acknowledgement. I currently am in Prince George's County, Maryland, and I am seated on the traditional lands of the Mattaponian, the Patuxent, the Piscataway, and the Mayoan and the Pamunkey tribal lands. And I wanted to give gratitude to them and to acknowledge that this is their land. I also want to acknowledge our other presenters. I'm going to let them do extensive introductions of themselves, but we have Amanda Thompson, who is with James Bell Associates. Amanda has been a great partner in this work. We could not have done it without her. She will give more of her background. I forgot to print out your bio. So all I can say is that Amanda is awesome, and I'm glad that she's on our team, and she's wonderful. And Erica Alberio, whose bio I also forgot to print out, who is also wonderful and has been with us working on this for the past 4 or 5 years and has been wonderful and has been a great partner. So we can move ahead to the next slide. Oh, and the next slide after that. So what we're going to try to run through in this time together is we're going to learn about how quality data supports quality programming. So in our mind, in our conception, data is not something separate from programming. So we're going to talk about how they're connected. We hope that you'll gain a deeper knowledge of not just data governance, but also data capacity building. We are going to introduce you to the very specific data governance toolkit, and going to talk to you about how two-generation programs or whole family programs have used data governance planning as a transformative process for their organizations. Two of your colleagues already know about that because they were part of our pilot. We don't have the online community. I forgot to change that slide. But we do hope that everybody will connect with one another and within your whole family institute, and as those who decide to come into that that sphere work, that this is something that we think that folks should work together on and should really build a community of practice around. We think that would help to cement what's being learned, and it's a great transfer of knowledge. So you can go to the next slide. So just so we know who's in the room, if we can, I'm going to put up two polls. One asking for you to describe your role at your agency, and you see that it's in on the chat side, and also just to see how familiar you are with the term data governance. And it's absolutely okay if you're not familiar with the term. We're just trying to see who's in the room. So I'll give you a minute to do that. And Amy, it looks like I don't see the responses, so you'll have to let me know when people are responding.
Yep, it looks like we are getting some good responses for the first question.
Okay. All right, and when you think we've hit critical mass, we can go on to the next. I think it's easier also for folks to say that they're not familiar with data governance when we're not in person. So you don't have to admit it to us in person. Okay, so a good number of folks are from the leadership team or the executive side of the organization, which I'm very happy about. One of the things that we did discover, and we'll talk about, is the fact that this kind of activity, building a data governance plan, is not something that should be siloed in one part of the organization, and that it does not work unless leadership is on board. So I'm very grateful to see that there's a good number of leadership folks on board. But I'm also glad to see that there's representation from all of our other groups as well, because again, you'll see as we go throughout this is really a team effort. And so whether you're frontline, whether you're administrative, this is not just for data folks. And it's actually kind of interesting and lovely to see that this is not a room full of data managers or just the evaluation team, because as again, you're going to see that this is really about the whole organization. Can we see the next poll? And again, Amy, you can just let me know when it looks like we've hit critical mass.
All right.
I hope folks don't think too hard on this one. Okay, so it looks like it's pretty evenly spread out between those who have not heard about it at all and those who are very familiar. There's only 3 of you who say you live and breathe data governance, so I'm guessing those are either our former grantees or somehow me, Amanda, and Erica somehow answered the poll. But by the time you're done, I hope that you're going to love data governance and you're going to think that everything about it is great. So let's go to the next slide. And the next slide. So let's talk about the program context. I use the term 2-generation. CAP uses the term whole family, but it is exactly the same thing. It's a holistic approach, correct? So the idea is that, as I said at the beginning, data is everywhere. Everything that you do has data attached to it. A family comes in and maybe they're just looking for childcare. Well, and then you find out that, oh, the child that's in the childcare needs speech therapy. Oh, and then by the way, the parents are looking for a job. Oh, and by the way, there's food insecurity. Every one of those things is a data point. And so it's important to acknowledge already that data is a part of your everyday. This argument is easier to make now that we're in times of COVID, I will say, because folks they just can't go down to the hallway and get information. They are really recognizing that they're holding a lot of knowledge. And as we say, data is just another word for information. So now that information is kind of coming to the fore, because sometimes for some organizations that might not have had a high level of data capacity, and we're going to talk about data capacity in a second, that they were not considering a lot of this information that they held as quote unquote data, but it is. So let's go to the next slide. So we like to talk about what data capacity is, because one of the things we noticed in the field is that people use the word data capacity a lot and they don't define it. There's people are talking about different things when they're talking about data capacity, and it's really a problem to use it as a catch-all phrase because usually people's data capacity is different in different areas. So, for example, well, not for example, so this is how we define it. We define data capacity into 3 different categories. There's the policies capacity, there's your technical capacity, and then there's your staff capacity. So starting with the technical capacity, that's a lot of times what people think of first, right? That's how many computers do you have and what software you're using, and especially that software question. People go to that and they think that is about their data capacity. But we argue that that's only one part. Then there's staff capacity, and that is another part that people don't always think about as much, especially as we were going forward doing this work and collecting information. It was interesting to find out who a lot of times was in charge of data, quote unquote, and a lot of times it was, you know, a family service worker that somebody pulled in and said, hey, can you manage our data? Or my favorite example is someone who told us, well, this person is our data person. And we said, oh, and why is that? And they said, well, they're a millennial, so they must get it. So we like people to think more intentionally about their staff capacity. It's also not just your IT staff. It is not just whether or not you have an IT consultant or in-house IT. And then, as I already mentioned, it is your leadership. Your leadership is part of your staff, your data capacity when it comes to staffing. And then finally, policies. And this is one that people don't think about so much. And some of you who didn't know much about data governance might have immediately thought that data governance was about the policies because of the term governance and board governance and things like that. But those are your policies that you have regarding data access, data sharing, data privacy. These are things that are your policy capabilities. And so what we find is that most organizations, like I said, will have strengths and weaknesses in different areas. So it's not enough to say we have good or bad data capacity. That's not the question. It is, this is what we do well, this is where we could grow some more. So if we can go to the next, before we go to the next slide, I also want to point out, especially when you get the copy of these slides, that there is a resource alert down there. And we do have a brief that goes into deeper delves deeper into this idea of data capacity and what it means. So if we can go to the next slide. So I want you to think and respond into the chat box about what area you are strongest and where you think you might need some growth as far as your own data capacity. And just want to kind of get an overall view of that. And you can just put it in the chat.
I think we're getting some responses in the Q&A as well as the chat here to Pring. So it looks like some are saying policies, technical and staff capacity. Others are saying data sharing and staff capacity in all three areas.
Thank you. I was trying to figure, okay. So a lot of the things are technical, but I also see, and like that, I see that there's also, oh, sorry, I got a note from the organizer. Okay, so the question is just, where are you strongest and where are your, where are you weakest? And some folks are saying that they're weak in all areas. I bet if I did an audit, I'd find out that you weren't, that you were stronger than you thought. But I do like the idea that people are thinking about it in a broader way. So let's go on to the next slide, please. So let's start with what is data governance. So we're here to talk about data governance, so let me give you some information about it. So there's data, which, as we've already said, is just nothing but another word for information. And then there's governance, which is an organization's ability to effectively manage and utilize data. So data is all your information. It's your quantitative, it's your qualitative, it is everything that you create across all your programs and across all your departments. So data is more than just outcomes, right? So it's everything. And then governance is how are you using that and how are you managing it? So not just do you collect it, but then how does it help you? And so data governance brings those two ideas together, and it's the practice of organizing and implementing policies and procedures to help you utilize and manage your data, and to get to really want to lean heavily on that idea of using data, because I know that one of the issues out there amongst those that I can't see is that you collect a lot of data, but some people aren't using it very well, right? They don't know how this data is supposed to help them with decision making. So this is what data governance will help do. We can go to the next slide. For this particular group, I wanted to talk about the intersection of Roma and data governance, because you already are doing Roma, and I didn't want you to think, oh, this is another thing. No, it's not another thing. It is actually, the two things are complementary. They come together and they can help each other. So whereas Roma is for your performance measure, right? It is how are you doing? It is focused on, not focused, but it draws in your outcomes, and which means it does bring in the evaluative components of your performance measurement. So as I said, data goes across all your departments, but some of that information may be context, and some of that information is for determining outcomes. And if you really want to get broad, outcomes doesn't just mean family outcomes. You can have human resource outcomes. You can have outcomes that are desired for fundraising, all of those things. So Roma then and data governance, what they have in common is that they're both comprehensive. So neither one of them is a narrow, limited view of your organization, which I know is another frustration that some of you have, especially with funders. is that you do a lot of very complicated things, and yet we treat you as if you only do the one thing that we're funding. So this is an area where this is understanding the comprehensiveness of your organizations and all that you do. So whereas data governance, like I've already said, is about organizing and making your data effective, well, ROMA is a management practice that integrates across all of your areas: administration, management, operation, and evaluation. So the data that you start to manage and utilize for your data governance is the same data that will feed into your ROMA process. So they actually work very well together. Let's go to the next slide. So I'm just gonna, that was all background. And so I went through it a little fast, and I'm gonna kind of do some terminology recap so that we can see where we are. And if there are any questions, you can go ahead and put them in the chat. I will need somebody to read them to me because my chat is a little wonky right now. But let me just kind of get us all level so that we dive into the next part, that we're all grounded in the same place. So there is data capacity, which from now on, when you think data capacity, I hope that you don't think some nebulous abstract construct. It is not. It's a multifaceted concept, and it has three interconnected components: your technical capacity, your policies capacity, and your staff capacity. And they go hand in hand to create the data capacity of your organization. So if you are involved in data capacity building, think about it across those three areas. Then there's a data governance plan. So the plan is what we talked about when we said there's data, and then there's your governance, and then you put it together. So your plan is like any other plan that you have to do, your state plans, your implementation plans. It's the blueprint for organizing and executing your data governance strategy. So the data governance toolkit then is what helps organizations develop that plan, because it's the plan that's the hard part. Well, the plan is an intimidating part at the beginning. It's all hard. Everything that we do is hard. But it's the toolkit that helps walk organizations through the process of developing a data governance plan. And the idea, just to put out there for our data governance tool, was that there are other organizations, other fields, other sectors that use data governance. There are businesses, corporations, governments, but when we looked at it, their language didn't line up to how we talk about things, so there was a jargon mismatch. But also, as one of our team members likes to say, their first step was different than our first step. So a corporation or federal government agency, they're just generally starting from a different place when it comes to their data capacity in all the areas than where the average nonprofit is starting. And so we wanted to get something that helped all nonprofits, and that is actually a little secret of ours, an open secret, is that the toolkit was designed with 2-generation programs in mind. However, it actually worked for any nonprofit. The other thing is we wanted too often data sophistication when it comes to nonprofit sector is tied to budget. So those that have the bigger budgets have more sophisticated data capacity across the three areas than those that don't. And so as we were operating and as we were building this, we were like, we wanted something that would work for everybody. I don't care if you don't have any resources. I don't care if you have money, but maybe in your community, there's nobody with the resources. You can do this by yourself. You can also hire someone to take you through that, but that's another thing. But you can sit down with your organization and go through a data governance plan. So if there's no questions, I'd like to hand it over to my partner, Erica, who will kind of get you into the nitty-gritty of it all.
Great. Thanks so much to Pring. And I love the idea of a land acknowledgement. So I am going to take a stab at doing it for the first time ever. So in the spirit of healing, I acknowledge and honor Algonquin, Mohegan, and Menhet tribes. Everyone, my name is Erica Williams. I am the founder and managing partner at the Alberio Group. The Alberio Group is a consulting practice that works specifically with social purpose-driven organizations, helping them to build their capacity. We do things like fund development, strategic planning, and in the case of the Annie E. Casey Foundation, have been known to do 1 or 2 toolkits. And so this toolkit is about data governance, and we are really excited to be sharing more about it. We can advance to the next slide. So this past year has been a trying year for us all, but certainly for organizations like yours who were trying to do what you do best, which is ensuring the success of every family in your path. And so when you think about your organization's involvement with data, as you reflect on some of the things that T'Pring has shared around your staff capacity, technical capacity, policy capacity even, would love for you to just post in the chat those things that really worked out well, like things that were highlighted as a result of this past year, things that you didn't even know that you could do well, either, based off of how you've been managing your data so far, you were able to quickly pivot or get additional resources for a thing. And then also, if you wouldn't mind sharing in the chat, what were some of the challenges that came up. And these could be new challenges or challenges that you knew you already had as it related to data governance, but maybe were magnified as a result of the pandemic. And I'll just give you a minute or two. Thank you, Shannon. Shannon says, we've to have to grow so fast during COVID due to rental assistance that we lost the capacity to have a policy in effect to keep track of all the data. And we've heard that a lot from organizations in trying to be responsive when you don't have like a plan or a policy in place. At some point, resources are flowing in, but at some point, who's ever providing those resources are going to ask questions about how it happened. And you're just like, we were just trying to get the money out the door. We're hearing success managing to be able to state how many new folks we were able to serve exactly. Challenging figuring out what funding sources supported new services. So being able to kind of keep your finger to the pulse of the community. Anything else coming up for folks? Maintaining up-to-date records for follow-up services that are usually face-to-face. Having to do everything virtually presents a lot of challenges, and thank you, Saida, for raising that. T'Pring, I don't know if you want to jump in or help me manage the chat for a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to say that there's actually a lot about the being virtual and how that was a challenge. But it was a challenge that a lot of people seem to have stepped up to. And I think what's interesting is probably when we did our first virtual conference asking about this, it was spring or summer of 2020. I think the answers about going virtual are very different now. I think people have really learned a lot over the time. And I think that's what we're seeing when I see a lot of these comments about success in maintaining virtual spaces, reaching out to folks, and maintaining confidentiality in such a difficult circumstance being virtual.
Great. Thanks, guys, for engaging in the chat. This was super helpful, and I just want to be mindful of time, so I'm going to keep moving. If we can advance to the next slide. So there's a toolkit for most of that, not all of that. I don't see all of those problems or challenges going away, but there is a resource in the Data Governance Toolkit. And just really quickly, the toolkit really was designed to help organizations that serve children and families together harness data in their decision-making, their funding strategy, and their service delivery. To govern means to conduct the policy, actions, and affairs of something, a state, an organization, or people, When we talk about data governance, as T'Preng mentioned, we are simply talking about a practice that helps you govern or manage all things related to your organization's data. Anything from what you collect, why you collect it, how do you protect it once you've collected it, and then how do you make it better? How does it better serve you? We want you to be governing your data and not your data governing you. We can go to the next slide. And then the next one. So the toolkit includes 4 modules. This is how we divided it, or I should say 4 areas really. First, with every module, we start with, establishing your why, like why is this important? Why is this particular part of the toolkit important? Is it data security that we're prioritizing? Is it communications that we're prioritizing? Thinking about building your team. This is important because at different parts of your process, you might find that leadership is super engaged in the beginning, and they certainly need to be brought in throughout. But then there are other people that you want to pull in for certain components, depending on what you want to tackle first. We always ask you to assess the needs and set your priorities, which is what I've mentioned. So in the toolkit, there'll be an opportunity for each module for you to really just rate yourself, like, how are we doing on this? And then they're reviewing the core components of the data governance toolkit, or the modules as we refer to them as. And we can go to the next slide to talk a little bit more about that. So data security and privacy, it's pretty self-explanatory, crucial component. I think we all realized through this past year just how critical data security and privacy is. And how challenging it can be, particularly when you're moving to a virtual environment, when your staff is moving to a virtual environment, files that are probably in paper in someone's drawer now have to come home with you. Probably not if you're practicing some security and privacy methods. Data collection, the outline really is about how do we obtain meaningful information? And I know some of our clients get a little weary of all the data that we have to collect because we're trying to satisfy so many funders' requirements, but also because we're trying to learn about the population that we're serving. And then more importantly, like, how do we get, if we have more than one data system, how do we get those systems speaking to each other so that it actually helps us become better at our jobs? Data change management is another module. So that really is about how should we modify our decision-making processes, as well as timelines for making those decisions. How do we go about identifying necessary changes and implementing those changes in a way that is feasible for your organization, that's productive for you? Then how do you make sure that whatever changes you're proposing are well communicated across the team? Then staff training and retraining, really, the frequencies, I can't tell you how many times, I'll meet with a client and they have someone who's been sitting in a role for almost a year, but there had not been any training on either a system or a process or a protocol around data. They're just kind of expected to know, maybe because they're the millennial, as T'Preng has joked earlier about. How we regularly identifying professional development opportunities to really support our staff and our teams and keeping them engaged with the data and what's changing. If you have a good stakeholder engagement plan internally and externally, it really does help with, I think, the overall sustainability of an organization. How wonderful would it be for a funder, when we get back to doing site visits, to stop at someone's desk, and because they have a really good awareness of what you do and can even throw in a few data points, make it like, okay, everyone within our team kind of knows what we're doing, what we do, why we do it, and the impact that we're making. The communications plan, I think I've alluded to that in terms of like how we, strengthening our stories with the data. The better you're able to manage your data and govern your data, the better you're able to pull out those key bits, those data points that make a real difference and kind of sets you apart from other organizations, maybe who really don't have a good handle on their data. And then the stakeholder engagement piece we talked about. this idea of, again, just making sure that you're not just engaging internal groups, but also external groups. I always think it's important, even for your constituency, when you've collected so much data about them throughout the year in your service and your planning. How often do we then get to share or reflect back what we're learning with our clients? And if you're intentional about that, if you're thinking about your engagement plan, you think about opportunities like that. Like, how are we potentially communicating with all our stakeholders? So that's kind of an overview of what we believe are kind of the 6 core components of any data governance protocol. It doesn't mean that you have to do them all. It doesn't mean that you have to prioritize all of them at once. But if you're thinking long-term about what my data governance plan is, hopefully they will have these components in it. We can go to the next slide. So this really is just us kind of, again, providing an overview of like the phases and how, when you're going through the toolkit, it works. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because, again, I know we don't have a whole lot of time and I want you to actually see the toolkit. But essentially from this slide, what I want to communicate is that it's an iterative process. There's going to be a discovery phase. There's going to be, prioritizing. There's going to be a prep for what you've prioritized. Then what's beautiful about the toolkit is that as you're putting in and answering questions and coming up with solutions, the PDF that you're completing is fillable. So you literally can do it once and you don't have to do it again. So once you put those questions in, you basically download what you've printed, and that essentially becomes your plan. What's also important about this is the revision opportunity. You always have an opportunity to revisit what's in your plan and to revise what's in your plan. We don't know when there's going to be another pandemic or another issue that comes up that will force you to revisit what you thought would be a good data governance policy, but turns out that you might need to change that. Next slide. So we're going to take a quick poll because, again, I want to show you what's in the toolkit. And so if you guys can vote on what core component of the toolkit is most interesting to you in your organization, and whoever wins, that will be the toolkit or part of the toolkit that I will walk you through briefly. It looks like the results are in. I can't see it. I'm not sure if someone else can.
Amy or Laura, can you tell me? Oh, there you go.
Can you see them now?
Yeah.
Data collection. Great. Looks like that is the top choice. So wonderful. If we can. Oh, it's really small on my side. Laura, can you scroll down a little bit? Okay, stick with table of contents. Thank you. Thank you. And then if you click on needs and priorities. Oh, back up a little bit. I'm sorry. Let's try the 6 core components. On my screen, I see a priorities is what I was hoping you can tap into. Okay. If you take your ball and go all the way up to page 3, it'll be faster this way. Yeah. And then go down to page 3. Great. And then if we can click on data collection, the process to achieve data quality. So I'm just going to get a quick time check. How are we on time? And I know Amanda still has a few minutes that she wants to share.
Looks like you have, yeah, just under 10 minutes, including Q&A. So you still have a little bit of time.
Okay. If you could scroll up just a little bit. Great. So every part of our toolkit kind of starts like this. It will kind of give you high level, like why does this even relate to data governance? Why is this important? If you prioritize it, you probably already have a good idea about why it's important for your organization. And really that is the only thing that matters outside this box. And then it will provide you kind of some reference material. So like when you are first pulling your team together to talk about, hey, we want to embark on this new journey and improve our data governance protocols. We're going to prioritize data collection. Before we get started, here are some things that we should probably be pulling together as part of our discovery phase. And so that required reference materials is exactly what that's informing, right? So your intake forms, your surveys, your progress reports, maybe a couple of funder reports, your state requirements, your federal requirements, because these are all the things that's informing kind of, what you decide to collect in your data. At the top of every module, it talks about like what topics and questions can you expect to explore. And this really, again, is just to help you level set as a team and really make sure, like, is this what we want to prioritize as a group? Or is it something else? So this kind of gives you a preview on the topics and questions you can expect to explore. This is what I talked about, like this fillable PDF. So if you scroll down a little bit, what are characteristics of good data? Pring said this already, like this idea that, maybe we aren't really good at it is probably not true. You're probably way better at it than you think you are. It's just a matter of maybe you haven't put pen to paper. Maybe there's no shared knowledge or brain trust on how you're doing this. So asking the question of yourself, what are characteristics of good data, can be helpful. And so really working with the right group to think through some of these. So note 3 to 5 of the most important reasons or important characteristics of good data. You would put that in that form. You can scroll down a little bit more. So this is, again, kind of an assessment. How does collecting good data help us? Again, what I talked to you before about how we frame all the modules is like first establishing your why. You want to get people enrolled in why this is even a worthwhile effort to push forward. And we can scroll down. Again, I want to leave time for broader questions. And keep going. Most of this is really kind of a questionnaire around what is working well, what are some things that we can do differently, what might be a better way, for instance, in this case, to conduct an intake, things you might want to change. Scroll down a little bit more. Yep. And again, all of this is just like an assessment. You're also getting to, okay, what could we do better to improve the work that we do? This is probably the only one, I think, because it's about data collection, that's really like understanding your practice. A lot of the other modules are more kind of, rate your staff capacity, rate your technical capacity, your policy capacity in each of the areas. And then if we needed to do better or could do better, what practices or policies would we change to make it better? And again, this is really just pulling from what you already know. You kind of have a sense of like what you could be doing better. It's just an opportunity for you to document it. Throughout the toolkit, we have references, supplemental information, other materials materials, links that you can go to, which we are identified throughout the toolkit as helpful resources to help guide and even provide some examples of what other organizations have done to help guide you along the way. And I'm going to stop there because, again, this is on the website, on NEKC Foundation's website. If you did a quick Google NEKC Foundation Data Governance Toolkit, you'll pull it right up, and it is available to you free of charge. It is intended to be a self-guided document, something that you can certainly do on your own, but there are certainly resources out there that can help you if you felt like you needed a little bit more support. And I think I am handing it over to Amanda.
Yes. Thanks, Erica. So again, land acknowledgement for my area. In the spirit of healing, I acknowledge and honor the Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Ute tribes, the original people of the land of Adams County. I further acknowledge that the land that make up the current state of Colorado are historically linked to 48 contemporary tribal nations. So I'm Amanda Thompson. I was part of the evaluation team that actually helped to collect data and assess this pilot of the toolkit in some of its earlier iterations. So on the next slide, I'll start talking to you a little bit more about what we found. I want to make sure we still have some time for questions, so I'm going to be very brief here. We collected some information about the process. We found out that it was a process, that it was iterative. So when you get the slide deck, the slide's helpful to look at because it's got some real world examples of some of the things that we saw that happened within those various steps. Next slide. Again, just a little bit of information about the pilot itself, who we collected data from. Essentially, the grantees all had a year of working on the toolkit. The one thing that I'll highlight is very few of them at the end of 1 year went, yes, we got it, it's completely done. It very much is a process, and some grantees felt like, we don't even have a complete data governance plan yet. And we had to kind of reassure them that, yes, you've got more than you think that you do, but it's great that you feel like it's not complete. It's kind of a living document. This is more of a process than an artifact or something that is just one and done. Next slide, please. So the lessons that we learned, the process isn't linear. Teamwork was definitely essential, but especially around those getting ready stages, collecting all of that information. And then on the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about the time that this takes to get completed. So like I said, the grantees had a year, and within that year, we collected data about how much time they spent working on the toolkit. On average, individuals spent about 8 hours a month. 5 hours of that was in meeting, and about 3 hours was preparing for those meetings. I will say, though, it varied quite a bit across grantees. Everyone took a different approach to this. So some grantees decided there was very little outside of meeting work that was going to happen. They were going to get everything done primarily as a team, as a group within those meetings, whereas others did a little bit more divide and conquer. They broke up into smaller groups and met and had different tasks that they completed and then reported back to the larger group. Sometimes different sections of the toolkit or different activities were delegated to individuals. So this fluctuated a bit, but that gives you kind of an idea of how much time individuals were spending working on the toolkit over the course of that year. And then the next slide. Don't be intimidated by that number of 8 hours a month because everybody said it was worth it. Certainly organizations face challenges that you always face when you're implementing any agency or any new initiative. They had to protect time. There was sometimes staff turnover, which could delay progress as things were moving forward. But overall, there are some really great successes. So some organizations were able to reprioritize funds for a data role. One organization changed and rewrote an RFP for a data system that was better able to meet their needs based on the toolkit work. Essentially, through the work of the toolkit, they were really able to better understand what data they had, what data they needed, and what they needed to be able to get out of that data system. And then several programs also reported that the toolkit unintentionally broke down silos and led to learning about other programs. So I think, as you guys know, as community action agencies, there's a lot of programs, there's a lot of services out there, and it's very easy to get siloed. And when you're able to talk about data and really get down to that family level and what's happening with that entire family, that's when we go back to that original picture and you're able to pull in all of those different data sources and really learn about one another. Next slide. And I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Depring now to just wrap us up with those final conclusions.
Yeah, and I'll do it really quickly. I have about a minute. There's obviously a lot of information that we rushed through. But I wanted to call out in the chat, wonderful Melody from Central Missouri. She helped us go through this, and her team and the team in New Orleans, these are great folks for you to talk to. They had to do it without knowing that it was an iterative process, without all the supplemental materials, without all the easy clicks and all that kind of stuff. They're the ones that helped us inform how to make it easier for you guys. So I hope there's some way, she put her email out there, Melody put her email out there, but really, really, really take care of, take advantage of the two CAP organizations that helped us with it. They have a wealth of knowledge. Just to the next slide. These are all the resources, so you'll get a copy of the slides. So those are all the resources that we reference. And then the final slide is just the contact us. It is very important to us that we think this is a great resource. I'm so happy that by being a part of Annie Casey, we're able to put it out for free. And so if you have any questions, you can ask any one of us, including Allison Mish, who also is from James Bell Associates and who is currently at this moment getting her second vaccine shot. So it's not in our presentation, but we're happy for that. So that is all that we have, and I will turn it back over to, I don't know if I'm turning it, who I'm turning it over to, but I'll turn it back over to our host.
So from the Q&A, we only have one question so far. That question is, how do you handle case files for families? The file is the family, so theoretically, any member of the family can ask to review the file. When children come of age, can they also request access to that file?
So we don't have an answer to that question because that is a legal question that changes depending on where you are. So what the data governance does is it kind of the planning kind of points a light on, oh, this is a big issue. We don't answer, and we need to figure out how to address this, because that actually in some of our other places, that's one of the examples that we use, is that these are files that contain a ton of information. So it's not just who's putting it in, but also who can see it and in what form. Because to your question, it's not just can the child see it when they become 18. There's, that's just one piece, but there's also when does it have to be de-identified data? When can it be? Is it okay to show it if it's aggregated? There are a lot of kind of nuanced questions, and so the data governance tool is not designed to answer the question. It's designed to give you the plan to delve into those issues to be able to answer that kind of complicated question.
Okay, we got one more question. What type of data management software are agencies using to compile data?
So I'm not going to answer that question either, because that is I wouldn't want to endorse anything. I would say, though, one of the big things about the data governance toolkit, and Amanda hinted at this when she talked about the organization that changed their RFP. So one of the many problems that we saw when we were doing some of the research that led up to deciding to do this toolkit was that people were turning over and over the software that they chose. They would choose software, work with the vendor, and then as soon as that contract was over, they were getting another vendor. And we did a lot of pre-work before we finally started even developing the toolkit. And we found that a lot of it was the organizations and the vendors just had a hard time talking to one another. And quite frankly, some of the vendors just flat out said, well, they don't know what they want, which is not true. You know exactly what you want. So again, the data governance toolkit is one of those things that helps you identify what you really need, so that when you go out there to get your data software vendor, you're getting what you need. Because I think up till now, what people are doing are saying, what's the most popular? And that's why I won't say a few, because there's some people who have been in meetings with me know which one I'm thinking of. But people would use this thing over and over again because it was the most used. But what I knew was it was also the most rejected and the most hated. So you really need to figure out what you need for your organization.
Let's see, we have one more, and that'll be the final question. Does the toolkit have any tips for communicating with vendors?
Yes. So one, we do have a vocabulary list. I can't think of what that's called, but we do have a glossary. So we have some terminology to help with, because some terminology we could turn to like nonprofit terminology, but some of it is like, you just have to understand this is the word that they're going to use, and this is our best definition of it. So there is that. There's also the way the questions are as you go through the questions in the toolkit, which you saw Erica take you through on the data collection. It helps you break down what it is that you really need and really want, which then makes it easier to communicate to the vendors. That's what we found, because we found that if you come in and you say, oh, I need to be able to look at all my family files, that to us sounds really simple and really straightforward, but we found that vendors were interpreting it in all kinds of different ways. And so we had to figure out how to help organizations break down what they need to then be able to communicate better with the vendors. But that was a very specific problem that we were trying to solve.
All right, that's the end of the Q&A.
All right, well, I just want to thank Erica, Amanda, and T'Pring. Thank you for being with us and for your presentation.
Thank you.
So just to go over a few last quick resource slides, I also put some things in the chat. One new initiative we have coming up is leadership coaching in response to COVID-19. So if anyone is interested in that, definitely be in touch with us, either Lana Shope or Lily Seals. And then upcoming is our Health Intersections convening on May 13th. We will be addressing adverse childhood experiences and toxic stress in children. So definitely keep that on your calendars as well. And whole family approach design briefs. These are agencies who have been working on their whole family approach, and we have these great resources that can help out your own organizations too. And then we had our Whole Family Approach Institute in December, also in partnership with the Annie Casey Foundation. So we have a wide range of resources from that also on our website. In Community Action Academy, we have some courses, a new one on family-centered coaching, and then a few others on Roma, on health intersections. And so that is available to anyone, and you can create a free account. So we look forward to seeing some of you for upcoming Webinar Wednesday events. And here's the National Partnership contact information as well. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you again to our presenters, and we hope to see you next time.